But, I mean, this didn't happen by accident, right? I mean, they didn't just suddenly decide, oh, it's Christmas morning, better show up for a bit of a church service. This was worked out. It was arranged. They would have had some fairly significant meetings beforehand in order for this to take place. Would that be about right?
That would be about right. What you get is when you look at the whole scenario of when the Duchess of York a year ago went to Sandringham but was not seen in public. And then, so she wasn't seen in public, but this year she has been seen in public. And I think it's a testament to where the King sees her role within sort of offering some sort of help to Prince Andrew, because clearly his life has been changed and he's very much a prisoner in the Royal Lodge down at Windsor. And the fact that she lives under the same roof as him, I think while they're not married, clearly they are a great support to one another. And I think that's what the King is trying to do in these circumstances, offer some support to his brother. Of course, he's made a lot of his problems his own, has Prince Andrew, but the family are trying to put on a united front when it comes to Prince Andrew. He is a complication. He's probably far more of a complication to them than Harry and Meghan in all the allegations that surround him, rather than the soap opera element to the Meghan and Harry story. So I think it shows that the King wants to try and have a united family, however difficult it may be.
Can that ever, I mean, if you consider the reason why Prince Andrew is out in the cold, I mean, getting up close and personal for many years with a convicted sex offender who then went on to take his life, and we know that come January, there's going to be more revelations coming out about him, which may involve Prince Andrew as well. You might think this is peaking a little bit too soon to try and get a bit of nice puffy PR around Prince Andrew. And the idea that, I'm just thinking, was this decision as stupid as going, well, you know, some people kind of like Sarah Ferguson. You know, she pops up as the occasional presenter on the telly these days. So maybe if she's seen, people will start to like the prince again. I mean, was the thinking that daft?
I'm not sure it's on that level, bearing in mind that her children were there as well, and her grandchildren and everything. So it is part of the sort of King bringing all parts of the family together. Remember, the Queen's grandchildren were there as well. So it was bringing great parts of the family together to Sandringham. So in many ways, it's a difficult conundrum for them, because what do? We tend to only see Prince Andrew now in a sort of the sort of public-private functions, of which Christmas Day and church going is in that category. Of course, there are crowds out there, but you won't see him anywhere else. And obviously the headlines might be fairly complicated for him come the new year, when names may be being revealed and who knows who they are. But it will be, obviously there will be a lot of people wondering what is happening, not least the Duke of York. So it is a complicated one, but Sarah Ferguson has always had the support of the family, knowing and seeing her rather as a positive influence on the Duke of York. Now, of course, he has created a number of his own problems. There's no two ways about it. His injudicious choice of friends has certainly dropped him in it, as it were. So he's got to try and extract himself out of that. Of course, he paid £12 million to dollars, I think it was, to Virginia Giuffre. So he's created this really difficult problem for the royal family. But the King wants to try and show, well, we're a united family, however complicated it is. But if you notice, he was certainly way down the pecking order in the marching order. He wasn't, as he might have been in previous years, in a much more prominent position. He was right out the back, as it were.
You're a man with your finger on the pulse, Rupert. What do your sources tell you about the state of mind of Prince Andrew? I mean, is this a perpetual frustration and annoyance to him that he's been relegated to almost person non grata? Is it something he can deal with? What's the deal there?
Well, I think he's probably finding it difficult. But remember, he's been cast by his own petard. So this is the problem for him. He's been stripped of all his honorary titles, patronages. So basically, he is occasionally we just see him driving his Range Rover around Windsor Great Park, or he sits on a horse, and we don't see anything else of him. And that's the problem. He is now a sort of prisoner in his palace. But it's his own doing. And I'm sure he loved being a fully active member of the royal family. And he certainly enjoyed his position. But now I'm sure he's finding it very difficult because he's in his early 60s. He's still, plenty of energy to maybe make a contribution. But I would suggest he is in a bit of turmoil. That's why there is the positive influence of the Dutch, his ex-wife, to make sure that he does sort of have something good company and someone who can be a positive influence. And bearing in mind that Sarah Ferguson has been through the ringer herself, recovering from cancer. So she's had a tough old year as well. So for her price, and the fact is we've now heard that the Queen, the late Queen, said that she can have her funeral service at St. George's Chapel and then can be buried in the Royal Mausoleum, shows that she does have a very positive place within the royal family and is seen as a good influence, despite all the problems that beset her in the 90s. But the fact is, the members of the royal family do know that she is a valued support structure. And, of course, she is the mother of two princesses as well, who at the moment, of course, have got young family, but again, may have an increasingly significant part to play within the royal family.
And in terms of, it's years since the famous Annus Horribilis speech by the late Queen, but they seem to have had quite a few Annus Horribili since then, almost on a constant basis, it seems, Rupert. How is it looking for the King himself? I constantly speak to people on this, and they, some people quite like King Charles, but everybody seems to come up with the same line. It doesn't feel quite the same as the Queen. And, of course, it's not going to for a little while, but there's PR to be done there as well, right?
Well, if you saw the programme last night, that was a pretty good PR job on the King and the sort of build up to the coronation and his involvement. So he wasn't lacking for a positive PR story in a 2-hour documentary last night. So there are plenty of good positive stories. But the situation is, I know we shouldn't probably bring sport into it, but it is the sort of Sir Alex Ferguson problem. When someone has dominated the scene so categorically and brilliantly as the Queen did, and for so long, the country has to get used to this new way about going things. And of course, the King's in his 70s, and it's still a big juxtaposition, and people have got to get used to it. But I do think that he is beginning to make his own stamp on proceedings. And while this programme was a very good PR piece, it does show him doing some good work. He worked with the Prince's Trust and the value that is put into that, and other things that he passionately believes in. So I think, it's a slow process, but it's one that I think he is gradually turning the country around into understanding that we're now in the Carolean era, and it's his show from now on.